from 2005 to 2007, I was in the Peace Corps serving in Honduras. Then I went back in 2010 to visit my wife well, now my wife, for a week. During that week, we did like a little mini journalism class. And after that, we were like, oh, that was pretty neat. And when it came time for me to do my graduate project, I got funding from the Duffy Fund, which enabled me to basically afford the plane ticket to get down there. And for 3 months, I taught journalism, basically inverted pyramid type things, to how to do interviews. And I taught that to 230 students, something like that, if I remember correctly, in 3 different schools, 5th and 6th graders. Anelka, can't remember her last name off the top of my head, but she did this great interview with a lawyer who had basically, her mom had been a lawyer, and she had been inspired to go into the legal profession to help represent people who had been wrongly accused. She did a really good job, and it was an interesting story because it went into a real problem in, especially, in like the developing world, in places where sometimes the legal systems aren't as transparent as they are here, or that there's often a lot of people who get accused unjustly of a crime, and there's not much recourse for a poor person who's been falsely accused. A lot of kids did stories on sports. In one of the classes, some of the girls wanted to do a fashion magazine. Some of the harder news stories that they covered, there was one student who had covered a pretty gruesome story of a father and son who had raped a girl, and then were captured by the police. And he did a story on that. I think his source was the other newspaper. He was getting it out of the newspaper, but he wrote it in his own words. And it was just kind of one of those things that it's kind of sad to see, 5th and 6th graders having that world around them. That like Honduras is the highest murder rate on the planet, because other kids did stuff on that kind of thing too, of like crimes and like gang warfare and things like that, drug trafficking. One kid did a story on the dangers of drugs and drug trafficking, talking about drug addiction and the drug violence. Of course we have we just had that bombing in Boston here, but the kids in Honduras kind of have to deal with that kind of level of violence on a daily basis. That every single newspaper has a gruesome image of somebody who was blown to bits or shot or killed or hacked up with a machete. So that's the world they live in. One of the things that I was kind of worried about going down there, and I try to, I encourage the kids, don't cover any violent crime in your neighborhoods. I didn't want anybody to think that like these kids were somehow snooping on gang activity or violent crime activity. And so, I told them, don't cover crime. I don't want you to get in trouble. Working in schools and being obviously a American, or at least a white guy, I was honestly safer than the Hondurans, because to attack a foreign citizen is going to bring in the embassy and things like that, and there's not going to be that impunity. Whereas, like, basically, unless a Honduran's rich, they're not likely to get nearly the same kind of justice that we expect here. Sometimes they're even just associated with a story. They might have been like an editor involved in a story. They really do have to fear for their lives, because it's so easy and so cheap to kill someone. And I've heard stories, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard stories that you can have somebody killed for as little as like $5, and that it's about 100 lempiras. That's about a day's wage in Honduras. Murder is cheap, and you're likely to get away with it. For journalists, there's not much protecting them, except there really isn't much protecting them. If you're not covering crime and drug trafficking, politics is a big thing that can get you in trouble. If you're not covering those things, they're okay. Yeah, the idea that like you can't walk out the door without seeing a murder, it's not true, but it's always there. For example, while I was there, down the street from my now brother-in-law, there was 2 bodies were found that were probably gang related, because they weren't from the area. They'd been they were stripped and had their heads in a bag, and so it would look like standard kind of gang killing or narco drug trafficking, killing. Shortly after I left and was back here in the States, I heard from my wife, who was down there at the time still, when she was my fiance, that at the house, right caddy corner to one of the schools I'd taught at Estados Unidos, there had been a murder there of some of the mother of one of the students in, I think, first and third grade. She had students in first and third. They believe it was her ex-husband came in and beheaded her with a machete during school. Like, the kids had gone home for lunch, go back, and then when they came back after school, she'd been beheaded. You don't let the news headlines necessarily make you think that it's just nothing but blood and guts. It's just something people have to always keep their eyes on their backs. The kids are just like kids anywhere. They just want to have fun, play. That's why they we're so interested in fashion and sports, things like that. And I definitely do have hope for the future there, because so many of the kids are interested in building a constructive future. They want to go into high school, they want to go into college. There's a really strong interest in the sciences and things like that. Kids want to be doctors, kids want to be biologists and environmental managers. They want to be, a businessman. Kids have hope for the future. It's not just this desolate wasteland out in front of them. And I hope with the journalism that it's shown them another thing they could do with their lives. Even if they don't become full-blown complete journalists, at least they know that, hey, I can write about something and get my voice out there, kind of play that integral role that journalism plays in democracy, of giving people a voice.